Welcome to the Imperfectionist podcast. My name is David Rendell. I've added some additional pink for those of you watching online since the last episode. I'm also wearing my Big Rapids shirt. They made a custom pink shirt for me after I spoke to Big Rapids Public Schools, spoke to all their staff and faculty for the second time just a couple weeks ago. But today, as you can see, we have a special guest from north of the border. Not only is she our first guest, she's our first international guest. I know her from Entrepreneurs Organization Calgary, where I will be speaking in a couple weeks. And Colette Hammond, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thanks, Dave. I'm excited to be here with you today. I am, north of the 49th parallel up here in Canada. I've always lived in the prairies, which is kind of the central part of Canada. Originally a farm girl. I grew up on a grain farm and eventually left the farm, moved to the city, as most people do nowadays, and pursued...
The city being Calgary or a different city?
The city, it was called Saskatoon, City of Bridges.
I know that one, yep.
So
in Saskatchewan, the capital? No, it's not the capital.
It's not the capital.
Is Regina.
That's
Regina
correct.
Is the capital.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I lived there for quite a few years. I've been in Calgary, I guess now for 22 years, and amazing place. It just got rebranded by an EO, Entrepreneurs Organization member, Blue Sky City. And it was before it was Where the Energy's At, which is a play on words because we're very oil and gas here. So,
that's true. I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
Little Saskatoon connection for me.
Tell me.
Is one of my long-term customers. They have a big phosphate mine a couple hours from here, and I've done coaching and training for them for the last 15 years. Is now called Nutrien. Used to be
Nutrien,
PCS
of course.
Phosphate. And their headquarters, at least the Canadian version, but even the full thing back then was in Saskatoon. And then it moved to Northbrook, Illinois, and then it moved to Loveland, Colorado as they keep. But it's partially owned by the Canadian government and has the Canadian ownership and all that kind of stuff.
I'm amazed that you know that today.
So I've been up there and learned about Saskatoon berries.
Of course. Yes.
And listened to a very awkward presentation where someone spent a full hour unironically telling us about the value of beaver and why we all need to get back to the beaver.
How ironic. And, now, the other very interesting fact, which is amazing, of Saskatoon, birthplace of Joni Mitchell.
Ooh, little folk singer there. All right, so you saw me. When did you see me for the first time? When did you get your Freak Factor introduction to David Rendell?
You know, I think this is like an online connection that's about to go in person.
Yeah.
And
so you saw it online the first time.
2 or 3 years ago, I think we connected.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. Sometimes there's so many different EO events. Like some people have seen me at MIT and EMP and KEP and all those kinds of things.
I know.
So what was it about the idea for people who are new to the podcast? Freak Factor is, that's the book. So, I did a good job pointing this time. Right behind us, that's the main thing I talk about how our weaknesses are also strengths. The things that seem wrong with us might actually be our superpowers, our best qualities. And part of the reason I'm coming to Calgary is because that resonated with you in some way. So what was it about that resonated with you? How does that sort of fit with your mindset, your background?
Well, I think it was twofold. I think part of it was my own journey of pursuing the checklist of life and it not bringing as much joy as I thought it would. And
let's stop there for a second. Tell us a little more about that. When you say checklist of life, it sounds like what you're saying, and I'll let you elaborate, but it sounds like what you're saying is like other people's ideas of the things you're supposed to be doing with your life. And you were checking those off pretty good and realized that's not really for me.
Correct. I mean, like some of it, you can't undo it now. Like I love my children. But
we'll make sure they hear that part. I can't undo
you can
it.
Just edit out this part and send it to me.
They're here now.
So. So yeah, there's like, there's this societal checklist of you should
Yep.
really have these things done, and don't forget they should really be done by this age.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was killing that checklist,
Yeah.
probably surpassing some of the goals of it. And
Yeah.
then eventually you just kind of hit these points in life, and which I learned through a guru in California, Philip Moffitt,
Hmm.
that we have these transition periods. So there's 28 to
Mm.
32, you kind of hit your first life existential crisis,
Okay.
and then 40 to 44, and then 50 to
Hmm.
54. And there's some later on, but I haven't thought about them yet because I'm not that far.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so I think I hit that first one, that 28 to 32, that I'm like, oh, I did all the things. And I don't
Hmm.
know, it's okay. And so that's where I started to question.
3 out of 5 stars. Would not recommend. Not quite as advertised,
No,
but
definitely
yeah.
not. So that was, yeah, that's where I kind of thought, like, what if I pursued things that were more aligned with me? And I know that's a
Mm.
lot of what you touch on. But yeah, I
Yeah.
know I really chased security. So like I started off with
Yeah.
a government job, and I just needed 35 years to get my pension. And then I
Just 35 years. Just a real quick stint. Just a little.
right, just a skippity hop. And then
Yeah.
I went into oil and gas because that's where the money's at, and I did
Yeah.
all the
Yeah.
things then to make the money,
Yeah.
and worked in taxation and parts of law. And again, it's like the money comes, that's not the issue.
Yeah.
Then it's the joy that you wonder, like, where's the joy?
Yeah.
Where's the
Yeah.
meaning, the purpose?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you got to that point, then what are some of the steps you took? And you're right, alignment. Um, we talked a little bit about that the last time. Um, Alignment is the key to all of this. It's not changing who you are, it's changing where you are. It's matching, it's finding the right fit. So it's not so much this is good and this is bad, or this is right and this is wrong, but like, what is it? Somebody else, they're like, isn't this government job the greatest thing? I know every day for the next 35 years where I'll be going and what I'll be doing, and I know it's consistent, and there can be a lot of pleasure and satisfaction for someone who is driven to get a lot more of that security and stability. So one person calls it stability, one person calls it boredom. It's both. It's just how it sort of hits you. So when you saw that you didn't have alignment, what were some of the steps you took to, well, actually, before that, what were the signs that it wasn't? Like you said, was it a lack of joy? Was it like, I don't like the way this feels? What was your sign that you were out of alignment? What could people look for
We're definitely
as kind of a
feeling.
trigger for that?
And then I think, like, the epidemic that, and I know this isn't unique to me, the epidemic we're in then is, well, I start doing all the things, and what do all the things come with? Loads of debt. So then
Okay.
if we chased money instead of joy and authenticity, now we have to pay for the debt because we chose to also make the checklist of life.
Which then
And
creates the cycle of
right?
nonstop, more
Can't
money,
leave it.
more debt, more. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I see this a lot in now where I'm at in this stage of life where
Yeah.
people are trapped there. And so there's kind of this feeling of trapment. How do I
Yeah.
reinvent myself? How do I start over from scratch? And so, of course, then you kind of have this disaster thinking of worst case scenario as we're wired. And yeah, so I don't think it was strategic. Like, I feel like you're asking me, like, I had a strategic plan. And I think it
Yeah.
was like the perfect storm, let's call it. Still partially destructive, but there was a rainbow after, you know?
Yeah. 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 So what were some of the things that you did to move from unalignment to alignment? And to be fair, like you said, maybe some of that happened to you or wasn't all chosen by you.
Of
That
course.
was something that I learned. I used to teach college classes. I was a college professor, but for non-traditional students. And one of the things that all the research showed is that people change while they're changing.
Hmm.
So people came back to school as adults when their kids went to college or when they became empty nest. People came back to college after they lost their job. People came back to college after they got divorced. People went to college after they moved across the country. In other words, when people were changing, they tended to keep changing. Um, and when people weren't changing, they tended to not change, right? It tended to not. So what was it for you? What was the path for you to go from unalignment to alignment?
No, I love it. I think part of it was I'd always gone to school part-time at night, so very
Hmm.
non-traditional. And I had 8 months left to finish a degree. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna jump in, I'm gonna go to school 8 months. And all in that period, I was like getting married and buying a house and all the things.
Hmm.
And and then realized like, okay, I'll do a career change and went into oil and gas. And oil and gas is much different than government. So this was kind of the first step to change.
Yeah.
And then I think it was when I had the idea to open a business, which is just, I was looking for a sports bra. I couldn't find one. How could it be this hard? And so I had the epiphany while sports bra shopping and thought, well, let's do this. Then God, I'm
Yeah.
optimistic. And
Right.
eventually did it. And then I always planned to kind of run it on the side. And so I had some other ventures, rental properties, and I worked and then opened this business and the kids and whatnot. But
And you were still doing oil and gas while you were building all these other
oh
things?
yes,
Okay.
which this is tied to much other stuff. It's like it's another way of numbing out, which is a much deeper
Sure.
topic. But
Sure.
I also then realized it was through divorce. And then suddenly I was getting divorced, which is huge change and huge trauma.
Yeah.
That I was like,
Yeah.
okay, I can't do all those things. And the kids were exceptionally young and go back to work downtown. So I thought, okay, I have to put everything into this business. And
Okay.
I did. And that's like when you give attention to the garden, then the
Hmm.
harvest comes. And so that's basically how the business
Ooh,
grew.
that's
And
very
I was
melodic.
able to
Wow. Very
pivot.
poetic. When you
Hmm.
give attention to the garden, then the harvest comes. That's nice.
Yeah.
What was the time frame for that? So you go government to oil and gas, you're in oil and
Yeah.
gas,
The
you start
government, I
doing
think I
some
was in the
side
government
stuff. What were
8
some of
years.
the time frames for that?
Hmm. I think I was in the government about 8 years. Then
Hmm.
I went back to school for 8 months and
Hmm.
started working in oil and gas 8 months later.
Hmm.
And then I'm trying to do the math. Five opened the business 5 years later. And
Okay.
then it was kind of within a year. The business and the divorce came quite
Yeah.
quickly together. And
Yeah.
then it was that, okay, I'm going to do everything I can in the business.
Yeah. Yeah. Was oil and gas better alignment than government, or was that just a side move? Like when you went
Oh
from
no.
government to oil and gas, was
Sure.
that at least better, more
I
alignment?
learned amazing things in oil and gas. And
Yeah.
it's very forward thinking and regardless, this isn't an environmental discussion, just the way that the companies are ran. And
We
so
don't have enough listeners yet for you to get trashed online for being an
give
oil
it
and gas.
time.
I'll
Give it
actually, that
time.
reminds me, I'll tell you a funny story because we just talked
Hmm.
about Nutrien. Um,
Please.
and this was years ago, and I was there for the morning. I might have been the full day.
Okay.
And then that night, they're kind of on the coast. I'm in North Carolina in the U.S., so they're kind of on the coast on the ocean side of North Carolina, out on this peninsula along a river where they have these big phosphate deposits.
Hmm.
And I was there all day doing some training and coaching. And then that night, I was speaking for Duke University's Masters in Environmental Leadership group.
Oh boy.
And the guy who hired me
I'm
at the
sorry, I'm just
time was like,
processing
"You
while
do
you're talking.
not need to tell them where you were this morning. They do not, it is not important for you to discuss your whereabouts from 9 to 5 today." But I've always been very kind of, I don't know if ambivalent's the right word, but I feel like a lot of people are doing a lot of good things, and we stereotype people, we
Hmm.
stereotype entire
Of
industries.
course.
And I know the environmental people at the plant, I know the safety people at the plant.
Hmm.
Um, and I also think, certain things have to happen in order for us to survive. So I'm not judging you about that. Okay,
Oh no,
so
for
oil and
sure, for
gas is a
sure.
little bit
And
of a better fit, and kind of vibed with you a little bit, the
of
change and the
course,
growth and the
it's yes,
learning and those kinds of
and the
things.
opportunities, and yes,
Yeah,
the your peers at work, all of that.
right,
Hmm.
right. And then the business, you're 5 years in, you're running them a little bit parallel. Then the business, what's is the business a perfect fit for you? Is it just a little bit better? Was it just a necessity
Pretty
at the
good.
time?
Like
How's that from an alignment standpoint?
there's some weird stuff I watch, Dave, and like one of them is Indian Matchmaker. I don't know why I love that show. But like if Seema Auntie wants to work for me, she's hired. And so she always has this expression that I love because people bring her their laundry list. And I mean, I forget how many years have you been married now?
I've been married 29 years.
29 years. Thank you. So I always chuckle, and because I have been married, it's
Right.
even if it wasn't 29 years, what they bring her is like some of it's comical because you're like, oh my God, it makes no difference in a marriage, these
Right.
certain things.
Right.
So she always has this expression where she's trying to coach them into like, 80% is what we're going to go for. That's our stretch goal in this finding the
Right.
perfect partner, which I think
Right.
applies to almost everything in life. So I
Yeah.
would say it's like an 80% plus fit. There were a
Yeah.
lot of things I had to learn the hard way. I had never even worked in retail before I opened a retail store.
Yeah.
I'd shopped retail, but much different
Sure.
experience, you know. Um,
But that's something a lot of times they say businesses succeed because the person realizes something that isn't being done that they actually value
right?
from, an experience. And they say, I'm going to make a business that's better for people like me, right? That can oftentimes
hmm
be the initiative.
No, of course. And
Yeah.
so, and that was basically the goal. And then I just kind of learned everything along the way. But no, it allowed me to work in areas that none of my previous careers or roles had.
Yeah. What was your percentage on oil and gas? Like if you had to give a percentage fit on oil and gas, what was your percentage fit with that?
I would say it's like 50%.
Okay.
Like, but
So the business was definitely an improvement
oh,
from
of
a
course
fit
it
standpoint.
was, of course. But
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
happens in oil and gas, and I don't want to speak for everyone, but I won't use names, is even if it's not the perfect fit, what they can pay you, you talk
Sure.
yourself into it.
No, that's a great
It's like,
point.
this isn't so bad. As
Yeah.
you go buy another boat or
Well,
vacation.
that's how people deal with potentially almost anything. I
Of
mean, one
course.
of the first responses I got to the Freak Factor speech when I was doing it just as a piece of the classes I was teaching
hmm
was this lady almost like started screaming at me. She worked for UPS.
Oh,
And she's like, "Are you telling me I've got to quit my job?" And I was like, "I just did a presentation. I wasn't even talking specifically to you. I was
you
talking
triggered her.
about these ideas." And what you sounds like you're saying is your job is not a good fit for you, but you need the money. That's just a reality for sort of everyone. So
Mhm.
I like your story. And that's why I was asking percentages,
Of
because
course.
I think that is part of it. It's like maybe there's no perfect fit, but if you can get an extra 5%, 10%, if you can get another extra 10%, 20%, if you do that over a course of years, and if you're seeking that, you're likely to find it versus going, well, the money's good and I can learn to like it. And it's like, well, A, no, you can't. It just slowly kind of crushes your soul.
hmm
But then you become, like you said, it may be potentially addicted to the money or just need it, to survive. And you feel stuck. And so, sometimes people tell me this is just idealistic to find alignment, but I think it's a good ideal to be happy, to be fulfilled, to do something you find meaningful. In fact, the new assessment that we're going to talk about at your event, Amplify, it gives, hey, if this is who you are, here's some situations to find alignment, and here's some situations to avoid.
hmm
And one thing I want to do is add basically what you're saying, which is a percentage score where you can go through and you can check the ones that fit and check the ones that don't and go, oh, I'm at 47% or I'm at 83%. But also see, well, here's how I could make it 85. Here's how I could make it 87. And maybe to your point, it's never going to be 100, but there is a zone after which, I mean, I was talking to somebody earlier today that I'm doing some coaching with the Amplify assessment. He goes, I wish I had it right in front of me because it was a great quote, but he goes, I basically don't have anything I have to do that feels like work to me.
That's amazing.
I mean, what a goal to have,
Yeah.
right? What a goal to have. What was government from a percentage standpoint? What was government when you were in government? Where were you at there? Was it flipped? Was it like 20?
Probably.
Probably
I was
about.
trying to be generous because I still have
The
friends
money isn't
there.
even good. The money
I
isn't
know,
even good.
I know, but it's like you don't know what you don't know either, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I used to work in nonprofits, and the meaning was very good. I think I had roles that fit me. I was doing changes and making big changes, and I wasn't doing routine stuff. And so there was a lot of good fits there. I was very passionate about what I did. I enjoyed it. I had a lot of opportunity for change and variety. The one thing that was never going to be a fit was there was such a low ceiling in working in nonprofits. I could be 50 times better than somebody else. They were never going to pay me 50 times as much, right? At the time I was done teaching, I was making 80% of my money being a professional speaker while I was still teaching. And as a speaker, if you can be 50 times better, you can make 50 times as much. I mean, there's people who make $100,000, $200,000 doing a presentation, and there's people who get a gift card to, for gas for doing presentations or do it for free. So you can literally be 100, 200 times better than somebody else, or get paid 100 to 200 times as much. There's no ceiling, but there's no floor, right? And that goes back to government security. For some people, the floor is what matters more than the ceiling, right? And for other people, the ceiling matters more than the floor. And again, that's fit, right? Oh, I wouldn't want that. It's too messy. It's too scary. Mm-hmm. That's fine. I don't think everybody should be an entrepreneur. Again, I think it's a fit thing. Is that what you want from your life or from your work?
Yes.
I think what's interesting is tell us a little bit more about the company you started, because I think it's a great example of fit. Because when I talk about alignment, some people see it as kind of an optional thing, but in pretty much every area of life, people recognize that when things don't fit, it's awful, right? And you were talking about looking for a bra, looking for a sports bra. I have 3 daughters and I've been married for 29 years. I mean, when things don't fit, it's no good. And what you discovered was a situation where things didn't fit, things didn't work, and you decided to try to do something about it. So tell us a little bit about that, because that was you saying, hey, this doesn't work for people. Let's make it work. And I think part of what you said too, when I was looking it up, was also this industry is only aiming its products at a small percentage of the female population, right? Like, it's like, if you're a Victoria's Secret model, we've got something for you. And if not, good luck.
And so that's kind of who had taken over the market. And again, never want to cut down any other businesses, but the chains, we call them.
I think there's whole documentaries cutting down Victoria's Secret and pop songs as well.
So and that they funded it, but hey. Basically what happened is somebody realized, okay, how can I take this, scale it, which we all want to scale businesses, a lot of us, and bring it to the masses. And so you can do that by carrying 16 sizes, but there's over 300 sizes in existence. It might be 400 now.
And to be clear, you're talking, because everybody maybe wasn't completely paying attention, your business is called Bratopia.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
It's lingerie and swimwear. And so everything we do is cup size, bra sized. And we want you to have the perfect fit. And even then you end up with this kind of bell curve of top sizes. Yeah. And then there's some outliers. And so it's in the outliers that are underserved or not served at all. And so that's where we come in. But we still cater to the masses. But we won't be dishonest with you. We really, really...
You try to go farther to the edges, though, than the other businesses do.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I totally understand that. Certainly not cup size, although if I'm not fit, I start to develop a cup size. But I'm 6'6", so finding anything that fits me, the businesses
6'6", and you're slim. Yeah. That's your challenge. Yeah. I know.
Well, so there's big and tall stores. Yeah, they're big and tall stores, but there's not big or tall stores.
No, exactly.
But also my daughters. So my one daughter, for example, is 5'10". She's a gymnast. So she's very muscular, very strong, very tall, very thin. And you can do these online fit quizzes, sort of.
Yes, you can.
She was looking for a swimsuit, but swimsuits only come in 1 or 2 pieces. So she's going for a 2-piece because a 1-piece is never going to work with her height and whatever. And she got shoulders, just back muscles people didn't know you had. And she said she did the fit quiz and she wasn't crying, but she was upset. And she said, I'm an extra small, medium, large, and extra large on my measurements, depending on the part of the body, right?
Right.
And she's like, so she just has to go like, I guess I'm going to get something that fits 2 of those 5, and the rest of it's going to be not great.
Hmm.
And even just finding pants that go all the way down to her
Of
shoes and things
course.
like that. So I think it's a great illustration of the importance of fit, right? When things don't fit, I mean, I never knew people's obsession with taking their bras off at the end of the day because they're
Right.
so uncomfortable. It's so painful. It's such a, so,
And
you know,
and the further part, and it's interesting because there's other items like this, but there's parts of life that women aren't participating in because they don't have a
mm,
bra that fits them properly. And especially when you get into the
yeah,
sports category, because you get
yeah,
into pain or it gets
yeah,
restrictive. And so,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So that's interesting. So you get into a business that's about creating that fit. And what were some of your when you sort of heard, I mean, you started thinking about alignment, but let's take a step back to what were you trying to align? Like, what do you think are some of your unique strengths and weaknesses, some of your unique qualities that make you, for example, a successful business owner, that have helped you succeed in other aspects of your life? What are kind of your unique strength weakness combinations, the weaknesses that, you know,
the freak factors.
looked bad in government but worked for you as an entrepreneur, or weren't good in the
Right?
oil and gas but were good? What are some of those strength weaknesses for you? What are some of
Sure.
those
I think
qualities
in
that make you
government,
unique?
it's the fact that I was entrepreneurial. I remember in government, and I even remember at one point, like I was probably 22 years old, and I'd been in the government, I think 3 or 4 years already, and just feeling depressed. So I went to go talk to a
Mm.
psychologist, and he was really funny. And he was quite sarcastic, which probably isn't allowed in their college, but I appreciated it. And he's like, "Oh
Is this maybe
wow,
Canadian psychologists were learning something about what happens north of the border?
that's right."
Oh, you have problems.
He's like,
It's
and
a
so
new kind of therapy. Just mock you, just ruthless mocking.
it's like those restaurants where they insult you and you can't
Hmm,
go there.
hmm.
So he was like, you sound like a fun person. You just went and traveled around the world, and you came back home, and you work in a gray cubicle answering tax questions. And weird, you can't figure out why you're depressed. And it was like this aha moment.
Oh, that's
And
good though, right? It's
oh,
like,
for sure,
yes. Whereas somebody else would say, here's how you suck it up and
yeah.
here's how you push yourself to be more disciplined.
Hmm.
And what are you complaining about? You have a good job that's secure.
Oh yeah,
You need to grow
that
up
was my
and be an
family's
adult.
advice.
You're like, I'd already gotten that,
And
so I
then
went and
and
paid for
then
some
with like
different
sprinkling
advice.
in some Catholicism for
Yeah.
sure.
Oh, sure. Sure.
So
If you
yeah,
only loved the Lord, you would. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah, so then I started thinking about, okay, where can I move? And that's when I decided to move to Calgary. But then going into
Mm,
like, and some of what happened in government too is like, it doesn't matter how productive you are, just like in your nonprofit experience. Doesn't matter if you're the smartest. There's a pay rate and a scale, and you're stuck in
yep.
there, which I didn't think much of. But I do
Yeah.
remember. I think the other thing that happens is it's more like our limiting beliefs. And again, going back to you don't know what you don't know. And I remember one of my managers here in Calgary in the government pulled me aside one day, and she was like, "What are you doing here, Colette? Like, why aren't you like in law or going to university to do something great?" And I remember
Mm.
thinking, oh wow, that's rejection. Like taking it as rejection. Like I didn't take it that she was trying to give me a pep talk and push me on to better life. I took it like, wow, I guess she really doesn't want me here. So it just depends
Yeah.
where you are in your journey and your healing and how you perceive life, right? How you filter things.
Right, but what a blessing that could be, though, right? Like you said, that's hard to perceive it because of the way she approached it. But instead of saying, you're not good here, she was saying, like, wow, you have a lot more than what this situation requires. She saw the lack of alignment too. And that's one way we can find out about lack of alignment is from others, right?
Of
But
course.
meanwhile, you have other people saying, forget alignment, just force yourself to kind of do whatever.
Yes.
Yeah. So when did
Sorry.
you start to see it?
So,
When did you
well, I
start to
think it was when I went
see
back to school.
what she
When I went
saw?
back to school, I didn't know what I was going to do. I was like, oh, I'll apply
Yeah.
in some jobs in oil and gas and see what comes up. That was
Yeah.
the biggest switch for me. But I think it was still like in oil and gas, just being, I chased what the others were chasing too:
Mm,
degrees, designations, increased responsibility, bigger titles. But the
yeah.
biggest thing that I think is even tied to freak factor, Dave, is it's what you tie your worth to.
Mm,
And so if I, even societally, what people will value or be in awe about, right?
Yeah.
So there's a part of it that's people are going to be in awe because, oh, you're the tax partner of the most elite law firm in town. Even if you're not
Right.
happy and you're depressed and you're making all this
Right.
money, you have this
Right.
elite title and you won a tax case, compared to if you share, oh yeah, I'm a public speaker. Even if they don't, maybe you
Yeah.
make more money than them, but societally we'll
Well,
see
I
you.
definitely do, Colette. I
Of
definitely
course
do.
you
I
do.
think that's crucial. We need to make that disclaimer on the
I know,
podcast too.
right?
Definitely killing
And
it
I
compared
hope
to
you
them.
can't read an income tax act for your own good.
Hey, I'm happy not to be paying those Canadian taxes. I could use
Oh,
some of
I
your
know.
health
I
care.
know.
I could use some of
Hey,
your
I'm
health
happy to
care.
have your healthcare premiums, okay?
I
Or
could,
some of your
yeah,
politics, but we won't go there today either.
yeah. I guess I'd be paying you if you add my health care premiums to my taxes. We're
Right?
paying the same thing. We're
We're,
paying
we're
the same
even
thing.
Steven then. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but I think that's good. That's like what you're saying is kind of, I think what we pursue sometimes would be, I would call it, just off the top of my head, like external alignment. Like
Hmm.
this is what will fit what those people think is good or valuable
Yes.
instead of what do I think is good and valuable.
And feels good to
This
me.
will make them happy.
Hmm.
I even if it doesn't make me happy.
Right.
This will be admirable, even if I don't feel good about it. So I think you know we're all probably pursuing some level of alignment. It's just is that internal alignment, like you said, joy, things that people can't see versus the amount of money or the degree or whatever it happens to be.
Hmm.
What was, you went from 20 at least to 50% alignment in oil and gas. So even with that, even though that was you kind of pursuing like I don't know, I guess this is what people do. What do you think fit you a little bit better there? I know you said it was there was a little more change and a little more innovation. Was that what it was? There's like variety, opportunity. Is there a
Yes.
certain amount of that you crave,
Hmm.
just
And
on your own?
and even some of the companies I worked in, like I remember the one company I worked for, they loved taking people and putting them in departments they had no experience in because they looked for at the core what were your strengths. And
Okay.
so whether you were in engineering previously and now you're going to go into distribution, they were like, you can probably be successful. And so I always thought that was quite innovative and interesting to do to upper management to really switch it up.
Yeah, it
Um,
is. Everybody doesn't do that. They just say
no.
anybody can be successful anywhere, or this is just what we need people to do. So so oil and gas, at least some of the places you were, they were looking at how do we match your strengths to the role. Even if you weren't, like you said, you're like, I'll suck it up to make the money. And they're like, well, let's try to make you more successful by getting
Hmm.
you the right fit.
And they really encouraged, like,
Yeah.
keep your resume up to date. And they even had like an internal mentorship program so that if I thought maybe you worked in communications but I worked in tax and I thought, well, maybe communications is more aligned with me,
Yeah.
I could go and now you could mentor me and
Okay.
expose me to that department and I could then apply to go move departments. So
Yeah.
that was quite interesting. These things were much more innovative than,
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have all the time to explain how government does recruitment and there's no such thing as promotion.
Sure.
So that was then like, oh, interesting. Look how different the world looks here.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like some of your going to the business full time was a necessity. Like you said, you're like, I don't want to go downtown all day, every day. I have younger kids. I need a job that's more of a fit with my actual lifestyle, which is another part of alignment, right? It isn't just my personality. It's also my life situation. Like I did my doctorate online, not necessarily because prefer online learning, but it was just like I didn't have the time and the flexibility to quit my job and go to school for 6 years for a doctorate at a traditional university,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think it also was a good fit with me in a variety of ways, but it sounds like it was a little more of a necessity for you. But it took you from 50 to 80. So what were the things about the business that were a step up from a match standpoint for you from versus oil and gas?
For sure. Um, Creativity. So I can be in any department and use creativity in our business. And I
Yeah.
think the bigger part, and this was from my own experience, and this was what like having the perfect fitted bra, it does. there's a psychology to it, which, even when you find those perfectly fitting pants and jeans, right, that aren't
Hmm.
capris, it feels good. You don't feel like you're this freaky 6'6" slim guy that can't find clothing. And that's the same
Yeah.
with women in lingerie, and we all wear
Yeah.
bras. So
Yeah.
it was that I wanted women to feel love and acceptance from themselves. And I truly
Mm.
believe that there's this ripple effect to it. That when you make a
Yeah.
woman feel worthy and loved and more confident in who she is, it ripples out to the world. And
Mm.
so it was about creating a safe space where people could be accepted for who they are. But then this is a theme in my life. This is how I operate
Yeah.
day to day.
Yeah.
And so I think that was the other piece that it really kind of filled up, was the impact I could have
Yeah.
on especially other women and the good we were bringing.
Yeah, I think that's big. Freak Factor, is a 8-part framework basically about thinking differently and behaving differently. But the thinking differently part is big on acceptance,
Hmm.
right? And one of the things, if your clothes don't fit, if your underwear doesn't fit, if you can't find a job that fits, but even just clothes that fit, then oftentimes people don't say, "I need to find stuff that does." They go, "I have to change my body."
Right.
One of the nice things about height is nobody thinks that. No one's like, "Well, why did you get so tall? Maybe just eat a little less and you could fit in shorter pants."
Like they still have
Or why did
the
you choose to
femur
have really long
reduction.
legs and a short torso, right? But
Hmm.
when it comes to other things, well, why don't you lose some weight? Well, why are you like that? Why don't you work out more? Why don't you build more muscle? Why don't you lose some fat? Why don't you do more squats? Why don't you? So it's easy for me to think. I mean, there's two ways to go with something doesn't fit. One is I need to change my body to fit the stuff they sell, right?
Hmm.
And obviously, like I said, the advantage with height is we don't think that.
Right.
But with other things, we do, right? Somebody puts out Sir Mix-a-Lot puts out "I like big butts," and then people are like, "How come I have a flat butt? And how
Right.
do I go to the gym?" And it's like J Lo didn't build her butt in the gym. J Lo works out, but her fat in her body goes there in a way that people find attractive.
Hmm.
Other people's fat never goes below their waist because that's the way their body works.
Right.
They're never going to have thick thighs or fill in the blank. So you have people trying to match their body to what's being sold instead of believing that who they are is fine. And so therefore somebody should be able to make something for them. And so I think you're right. It isn't
Hmm.
just physical fit. It's like, what do I do with the fact that nothing fits? And what I have to conclude is there's something wrong with me. And if
Of
I just
course.
changed,
And
then yeah,
regardless of fit, like even what you're touching on now opens up this huge discussion on, especially as women, look what we can spend money on in a month. And I've laughed about this with my female peers where we're like, okay, we can get filler, plastic surgery, implants, reductions, tucks, you
yeah,
name it, hair extensions, eyelash extensions, and like God bless all
yeah,
of them. I have friends making huge money in those
yeah,
industries.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I laugh because I remember this friend of mine, like one time we're talking and he's like, "Oh yeah, I better get a haircut soon." And I was like, that's the only beauty regime, that and shaving, that he does in his
Yeah,
life.
yeah. And some people
And
don't
that's
do
it.
that, right? They got the neck beard. Like they're not even,
I know they
yeah.
don't even care. They
They
don't
got
even care.
they've got caterpillars
Hmm.
crawling over the top of their
Hmm.
glasses, their eyebrows.
Right.
I
And
didn't know
so,
about eyebrow management till probably 10 years into marriage. I was like,
right.
"What do you mean?" She's like, "They were getting out of control. I had to trim my eyebrows." I'm like,
Hmm.
because for example, you would never trim your eyelashes, like they are self-managing, right? So
Of
I
course.
didn't know. I didn't
No,
and
for sure.
and I found out I had beautiful eyelashes. She was like, "I am so jealous. How did you get such luscious lashes?" And I'm like, "First of all, this is not paying off for me in any sort of way. There's
Right.
no man on Tinder going, 'Hey,
Great
luscious
lashes
lashes
while holding a fish.
right here.'" Yeah, holding it up, close to his face.
Right.
Do you see him? Well, and that's the other thing for women that I think is tough. For men, you buy pants in a size and you buy shirt in a size.
Hmm.
Um, and men, sure, like for me, it's hard to find a neck size that matches the arm size because men's shirts get bigger in the neck as they get longer in the sleeves, because again, they figure you move
Oh,
bigger and bigger.
interesting. Of
But
course. Of
but you still
course.
have an easier time. Whereas the things that need to go right for women's clothes to fit, I discovered, is there's about 27 different factors that go into, and there's so
Hmm.
many different styles of clothes and those kinds of things. Um, what else? What else? Anything else that you can think of that you used to think was, hey, I wish I wasn't like this, and then as you became more successful in the business, you're like, I'm so glad I'm like this, I'm so glad I have this quality that I used to be sort of ashamed of or thought wasn't good or wasn't going to make me successful?
Well, there'd be plenty, but something we really laugh about at work is like the discussions we have in a day because of all the stuff like between lingerie and swimwear. And we also have intimacy devices. I'm huge
Hmm.
on sexual health as well. And so
Yeah.
some of the discussions we have some days, like I always laugh with my staff. And one of my key managers used to be a civil engineer, and we just hired our first male, and he used to do procurement for cargo ships. And so we'll be in discussions, like serious discussions, and I will break into laughter because I'm like, guys, I would have been escorted to HR downtown right now,
Oh,
walked out, probably charged and sued if I would have had these same discussions.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
even it's funny because there's certain special occasions or at Christmas, people, the staff can make a wish list. And this is another joke that I'm like, any other job, if I would have gifted one of my employees lingerie for Christmas,
Oh, absolutely.
I would have been gone.
One of my first jobs out of college, we did, I don't know if they, I'm sure they have something similar in Canada and maybe they call it the same thing, but we would do a thing at Christmas. It's pretty common, called White Elephant or Yankee Gift Exchange or
Oh,
something like that,
yes.
where you're
Yeah,
basically giving somebody something they don't want and it's just to make it funny, but
of
then you
course.
can maybe steal what somebody else
Yes.
has or get rid of.
Yes.
And so I'm brand new to the work world, and I grew up very conservative religiously, probably sounds like somewhat similar to you. And so
Hmm.
I'm trying to be appropriate and correct and, whatever. And this is the early 90s. And I just open up my gift. It's probably 50% men, 50% women, probably 10 of us. And it's just a breast pump. And I'm like, I don't know what's happening right now. Is it okay for me to be touching this? And like you said, is HR about to come and have a conversation with me?
Hmm.
So part of it sounds like, is that freedom to sort of be yourself and to do what you want and talk about
Right.
what you want and to decide where your boundaries and the people around you, where their boundaries are. One of the subtitle of Freak Factor is discovering uniqueness by flaunting weakness. And flaunt means to parade without shame. I spent my first episode talking about this, to parade without
Hmm.
shame, to be unapologetic, oftentimes about things that people have taught us to be ashamed of. Don't be like that. Don't talk about that. That's
Right.
not appropriate. All of those kinds of things. So it sounds like some of the fit for you has been able to break free of some of those barriers that would be there in corporations, in
Hmm.
government, and in your own business. You can set rules in a somewhat different way than other people might.
Oh, definitely. And I think like it's funny because even the more what you preach and what I love about your work is the more I've met people that are super authentic, like I
Yeah.
can't help but love them because
Mm,
it takes so much courage to be your true authentic self
yeah.
and
Yeah.
unmasked
Yeah.
that I have always been attracted to those people. And it's not till some recent work I've done with someone that I realized how much I repel away from people that are masked,
Mm,
artificial.
mm,
They're not, you can just feel their energy that they're not being who they
yeah.
want, or they're following someone or something to
Yeah.
belong. And
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
another deeper conversation about belonging and connection. But
Yeah.
I just, authentic people that just serve it up real,
Yeah.
it's so refreshing. And that's like who I surround myself with.
That's interesting the way you said that, because in Pink Goldfish, which is just the freak factor for companies, right? It's
Hmm.
weaknesses are strengths in organizations as well. Um, we talk about that when you do things, when you decide intentionally to be imperfect and to do things a certain way, it's going to repel some people, but the very same thing is going to attract others. So it
Yes.
pushes the wrong people away. And what you're saying, which I hadn't thought about, is that, although maybe I had, but that the same thing is true for us as people, right? That authenticity is going to turn some people off. Oh, you shouldn't be like that, or that's not good, or that's not my style. But we never say that. We just go, that's wrong or inappropriate or whatever. But for other people, and that's what the pink does, right? The pink is totally that. Like some people thinks the pink I wear is the coolest thing they've ever seen in their entire life, and they like that I wear so much of it and that I emphasize it. And there's other people who are like, nah. Like I did an Ironman once, and I had some
I can
my
imagine how that goes over in Republican states.
yeah
Just saying.
yeah my my Ironman triathlon suit, which is already skin tight, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I'm coming out of the swim, so I don't have the shirt part on yet. That'll come on later. But it's black background, but it's like cherry blossoms, right? Those pretty cherry blossoms, which are mostly pink. And so I'm running towards the bike station where I'm going to get on my bike and put on my gear and everything. And I'm just wearing these shorts and nothing else, literally. And this guy goes, "It looks like you got your wife's triathlon shorts on," or whatever, right?
Somebody says
So
this to you,
yeah, he shouts that to
and he's
me.
being a genuine asshole.
Yeah, yeah. And so
Okay, wow.
whereas other people are like, it's very attractive to them. It's very fun. It's very cool.
Yeah.
It's very, in fact, that's one thing that people will do that's the reverse. It's always a guy, and he'll say, I don't think I could pull that off. I think it's cool, but I'm afraid of what the people around me would do if I did that. And so that goes back to your thing. And that's why I think some people resist it. If I can't be authentic, I'd rather you weren't either, because I wish we all play the game the same way, right?
Yes.
I wish we'd all play the game the same way.
And I think that's you hit the nail on the head with that. And that's like what lurks in shadows is that's what triggers people. They wish, and even if it's not about the color pink and dressing in pink,
no, just about whatever.
Something in them that they're not living authentically.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna do one quick thing here, and then I'll give you a couple seconds to think about this. I'd like to wrap up with, if you've got a book that you've read that you think was very helpful for you, and especially if it relates to what we've been talking about, but if not, that's okay. And also if you have a quote of any kind that's kind of guided you. I know you've already said a couple along the way, but one of the things I've been doing so far with the podcast here is every episode we have a section called Not Sponsored By. And so today we are not sponsored by Freaker USA. So my book is The Freak Factor. And Freaker USA is here in North Carolina. It's a local business in Wilmington. And they make little koozies and covers for bottles and cans and stuff like that. That's how they started. But then they got into socks. And so what I do is I buy all their pink socks. If you're watching, you can see them, but I'll tell you about them if not. And so their socks are all fun, and they have funny little sayings on them and fun pictures on them. So I get the pink ones. This has llamas. And they're spitting, and it says spit happens. So it's always a little play on words. So spit happens. These have hot dogs and roses all over them. They're called buns and roses. That's one of my favorites. This is tropical. So it's a lady wearing a hula skirt, wearing a hula skirt, but she's looks like a pickle. My daughter's gotten into crocheting lately, so we both got a pair of these. They're called granny squares. This is one of my favorites. This is a good sense of what they do. These are called Dolly Llama, and so it's Dolly Parton on the top on a llama body, sort of a wild centaur sort of thing. So anyway, this week we are not sponsored by, and sometimes it works out perfect because at an event later this year that I'm emceeing, we're going to have Gene Simmons coming to the event. And I already have these socks from Freaker. It's Stranger Tongues. So it's a kiss on the top and then Stranger Things, like the TV show on Netflix. So I already have some Gene Simmons Freaker socks as well. So this week we are not sponsored by Freaker USA in Wilmington, North Carolina. So Colette, as we wrap up, a book that maybe has been influential for you, maybe related to what we're talking about, maybe not, that people could check out, and then maybe a quote that's kind of guided your life or your work.
Okay. Let me think. I
My
think,
not
and I'm trying to.
sponsored by was too interesting for you, so it didn't
It
give you time to
was. It
think.
threw
You
me
were so
off.
fascinated.
Especially Dalai Lama. I love Dolly.
Dalai Lama,
Definitely.
that's a favorite of mine.
Right. Um, I think one of the books that of a multitude of them. I think I've read all of Brene Brown's work. Um,
Mm. We talked about her last week. In fact, the
Mhm.
quote of the week was a Brene Brown quote last week.
Okay, and Braving the Wilderness. And
Mm.
what I love in Braving the Wilderness, she
Is that
talks.
her book,
That's
Braving the
her book.
Wilderness?
That's one of the
Is the
books.
book?
This is the one
Hmm.
that what I loved in it was like get up close and personal to people because you can't hate people up close. You can only hate them
Ooh,
back while talking shit
yeah,
about them. And
yeah,
so, and I know she released that during some tense political times in the US that we also won't talk about today.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, and then let me find, I found this great quote. Hang on.
No, that's good because I've definitely experienced that in EO. Entrepreneurs
Yes.
Organization has helped me a lot with that because, for example, I was able to do a series of presentations all over the Middle East, including Pakistan. And one of the things I always tell people is you have your idea from what you've been fed
Mm-hmm.
about what people are like. When I went to Pakistan, I met people who want to have happy families and want their kids to grow up and get a
Yep.
good education and have a good job and have a good life and have families of their own, and people who want safety and security and religious freedom. What you find out when you meet real people from all over the world, and I've spoken on every continent now, is that they're a lot like you and me. They're not fundamentally different. And that's what we like to do, is dehumanize certain kinds of people or groups of people. And I think you're right. Up close, it's almost impossible. I was in Egypt last year and they almost canceled the YPO event, the Young Presidents Organization event
Oh,
that I was going to do because of the war
of
between
course.
Israel and Gaza and Palestine. And they they asked me to change my speech to make it match, kind of the situation, which was a huge challenge. But then a whole group from Sweden didn't come to the event because they didn't feel like it was safe.
Well,
And then they dedicated half the event to having one of the foreign ministers from Egypt from the past talk about the situation. And to be in a situation where people are talking about their lives, their friends, their family in that context, you can't have some of the easy biases that we have from a distance or from not knowing
mhm.
anybody directly, in those situations. So I love that. You can't hate people up close. I like that.
Right.
Although you can if you're married to them. That's hate. That's
Oh man. Yeah,
that's where that happens.
for
All
sure,
right.
for sure. So
Did you have
okay,
a quote
I
for
did.
us?
So this is one, and this is
Okay.
it's from the great Rick Rubin, and
Ooh.
this is just kind of how I've always lived my life.
Music
Right.
producer, for people who don't know, music
Right.
producer,
Mm-hmm.
famously, I know Beastie Boys.
Mm-hmm.
He was the producer for Run DMC. Am I wrong about that?
I can't remember all his work. He's
Yeah,
only come
but
into
very
my life
famous. He
recently.
recently put out a book,
Mm-hmm.
that I've heard a podcast with him, Rick Rubin. Okay,
And like super unique character.
yeah, yeah,
And I also heard his speaking fee. I think I had to be defibrillated after, to be
yeah. If you
honest.
need to picture Rick Rubin, just picture, if you've ever seen a picture of bearded Jesus, but if he was 70 years old and a little bit
True.
heavy, like he's
It's
not
like
six pack Jesus
a
anymore.
bearded Jesus and Santa were like AI,
Oh, Santa, that's the vibe.
right?
Yeah. So gray beard, gray hair. Yeah, Rick
Hmm.
Rubin. All
Yeah.
right. What was the quote?
And even he was on the Lewis Holmes podcast recently, and it was interesting because the little clip I saw too is what he said is just don't think about who you're producing for, just produce, and then the people will
Mm,
come who's attracted to it.
mm,
And his quote is, "Your self-expression allows the audience to have their own self-expression."
mm.
And
Like it gives them permission, do you
it
think?
gives
Tell
them
me your
permission.
interpretation of that.
Yes, it's that. So, in my experience, when I'm authentic, honest, vulnerable, it opens
Yeah.
that in the other person.
Yeah.
And they don't feel they have to like bullshit or pretend they're happily
Yeah.
married when they're not, or they
Yeah.
can tell me the truth that their business is shit right now. And it
Yeah.
takes away all that masking and those protective forces between us. And so that's what when we see that authenticity in people, it creates the waves of that out too. And that's what I love
Yeah.
about this quote.
I love it. I love it. It reminds me of something funny. We all clean up our houses before people come over.
Yes.
So then people think our houses were like that before they come over. So then other people clean up their houses before we come
Yes.
over. And if people could just stop, then we could just all go to the houses that we all live in anyway. And but like you said, it goes the opposite way too, right? A refusal to express myself then fosters that in others, right? I'll have a fake house, you have a fake house, I'll have a fake smile, you have a fake smile, I'll have a fake persona,
Right.
you have a fake persona.
Mm-hmm.
That's really good. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we both have spotless baseboards, and that's what counts.
My wife told me that once. She said that she'd cleaned them, and I was like, I didn't know
See?
that happened.
See?
I didn't
This is why
know
the pressure's on women.
that was a thing that could be cleaned. I didn't even know that was one of the options. You could have given me a list of 50 things that could be cleaned,
Of course.
and I didn't know that's what happened.
Mhm.
So this is awesome. So I was at Big Rapids a couple weeks ago speaking to teachers and students. I'll be with Colette up in Calgary, speaking to her EO Entrepreneurs Organization chapter up there. So what we'll be talking about is my new assessment, which is Amplify, which is based on the freak factor that weaknesses are also strengths. And so we'll talk about the things we've been talking about: authenticity, acceptance, alignment, understanding yourself, because all of this authenticity assumes awareness, right? Self-awareness. And we didn't get to talk about it, but assessments are crucial to that. And so if you understand yourself, then you can look to find that fit also, but you have to accept it and not just accept it, but also appreciate it. So Colette, it's been fantastic to talk with you. Anything you'd like to say before we wrap up?
No, I just want to thank you. I thank you for your work and sending that message to people about embracing whatever is unique about them and living life to the fullest is what that
I
does.
love it. Fantastic to talk with you. Can't wait to see you in a couple weeks. And
Same here.
let's call it a day. Thank you for joining the Imperfectionist Podcast. My name is David Rendell. This was Colette Hammond, and we'll see you next time.